Sten, we're live.
Thank you, Larry, the Liberty Guy. Welcome back to In the Dugout. I decided to go with my Red Sox alumni jersey from my 1986 team. Let me get these damn earpieces out of my head. And welcome to In the Dugout. Mike Stenhouse, your host. All right. You're not going to believe me, for those of you who've known me for a lot of years. Roadmap Rhode Island is coming back, folks, and it's coming back hard. Thanks to Joe Biden. We thought we were rid of it under Trump after Obama implemented it. It's coming back hard. It was featured nationally by Tucker Carlson a few nights ago. We're going to review some of what he said, some of what we believe, and some of what's going on. And and it's going to be even worse than it was the first time around. So hold on to your hats, hold on to your property. Roadmap Rhode Island is coming after your private property rights. And it's called the Home Act under President Biden. All right, so that's the first issue in my commentary today that I'll focus on. We're going to have a really great discussion with Barth Bracy. He's the executive director of Rhode Island Right to Life. We haven't talked much about the pro-life movement, the abortion push in this state. And he's going to basically bring us up to speed. Where are we in this state? You know, what are the battles ahead? And what's happening federally? There's a real important federal component to what's going on in the pro-life movement as well. So we'll have a good discussion with Barth Bracy. He's a great guy. He's a great communicator, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. And then our final guest, our final segment today, it's going to be very interesting. We're going to have on Jeff Krupp. Now, you don't know who he is, but he's someone I just met earlier this month in Idaho at the Coeur d'Alene Resort. So I'm going to put on my Coeur d'Alene Golf Resort cap, which is from the resort in Idaho, where I met Jeff. Now, Jeff is my counterpart. He runs the center-right meeting of various groups that get together monthly in Oregon. I run it here in Rhode Island, and all the state leaders got together under the auspices of Grover Norquist's Americans for Tax Reform to just have a few days of meetings. Jeff has a radio show in Portland, in the Portland area. And the question we're going to put to Jeff, and you're going to be stunned, and you're going to enjoy the answer. Is Providence, Rhode Island, on the same path to maybe actual death of a city like Portland, Oregon is? You know, we've all know the book, was it Arthur Miller, Death of a Salesman? We may be seeing the first death, literally a death, of a major United States city. And the parallels with Providence are frightening. So stay tuned for my discussion with Jeff coming up. Tomorrow, 2 confirmed guests. Nikki Niley, the CEO of the national group Parents Defending Education, brand new group, great education advocate in this state. Erica Sanzi is a leader in that group. But Nikki Niley is going to be our guest. And we're going to talk about, you know, we've talked a lot about South Kingston and Charahoe and what's going on in Westerly with critical race theory and other related educational issues. And we're going to talk about her to get a national view. Are we worse than what's going on in all the states? The same? You know, where is Rhode Island fit into this national left-wing push? So we're going to talk with Nikki Niley, and then, of course, Dr. Andrew Boston tomorrow. And speaking of Dr. Boston, there was, I mean, I was again I am astounded, continually astounded at the level of ignorance, the obvious agenda that we don't know what it is, but there's obviously an agenda behind the scenes that are driving public officials and health officials on this mad, indiscriminate push to just vaccinate everybody and mask everybody, including kids who are at no risk. You've been hearing on this show, even the World Health Organizations and the CDC and the FDA understand these risks now, but not in Rhode Island. A press conference today with the governor, with the director of education and the director of health. And I had to use the word, you can see it right here, ignorant. They were putting out ignorant, I would even say dangerous guidance to K through 12 students and school districts and parents in this state. It's astounding for people who say they follow the science who completely ignore the science. It's absolutely astounding. More on this tomorrow with Dr. Boston. That's all I'm going to say about it today. Today's also, today is Wednesday. Today's also a big day in the news. And here's a little funny. I love my funnies on this. So here's Kamala Harris, Vice President, rushing to the border. The reporter asking her, are you looking into the root cause of immigration? No, I just want to get there before Trump. And we know that's all true. So Kamala Harris went last week. It was a nothing burger. I mean, this woman adds absolutely nothing to the political discourse or the political debate. I mean, you talk about zero value add, except for the traditional minority tropes. This woman adds nothing to the political debate. But Donald Trump is going to the wall later today. I don't know if it's tonight or if it's happening right now as this show is broadcast. You want to talk someone who changed the national debate, that was Donald Trump on this issue. Vice President Harris is a complete zero, nothing burger. Symbolism, 100% symbolism, 0% substance in my view. You tell me if I'm wrong. You write something in the comment section if I'm wrong. I mean, there's a reason she dropped out before she even got one vote in the Democrat primary. This woman offers nothing. You want to talk about an empty suit. I could use all those colloquialisms. Anyway, all right. My main talk today in my comments. Roadmap Rhode Island redux. Were it not for our center many years ago, Roadmap Rhode Island would have happened quietly under the radar. Your property rights would have been eroded without you even knowing about it. They ended up getting eroded, but at least you knew about it. And at least you kept your eye open for things, whether you're working on your local town council or whatever. But it's coming back under Joe Biden. And it was brought into national discussion by Tucker Carlson. You know, this guy, Tucker Carlson, you know, he has a knack for getting into the topics and explaining the topics that are important, complex topics in such a succinct way. He spent a good 15, 20 minutes in his opening remarks, I think it was Monday evening, talking about, one aspect of this whole sustainable living, push out there. And I guess the way you just saw in the graphic, I guess one way to categorize that is the left wants to abolish the suburbs. Now, Donald Trump did a terrible job of that during this past campaign, he was just saying, Joe Biden wants to eliminate suburbs. And he didn't really explain how or why very well at all. And I don't think it was an effective campaign for him. But it's true. They've been trying to abolish the suburbs since the Obama administration. And Donald Trump was right that they are now trying to do it again under the Biden administration. And if you think back, if you start connecting the dots, we got this critical race theory now, the systematic racism push and call. Private property is the building block, the fundamental building block of free market capitalism. It's the ownership of property, the collateral you can obtain from that through a home equity loan, or whatever, the value you can pass down to your heirs. It is the ownership of private property that allows free market capitalism to work. Without private property ownership, or with private property ownership under enormous regulation, you can't have a thriving free market capitalistic economy. And that's our country. You might not like it, but that's what our country is built on. That's what we believe in. And that's why the left is going after private property, because they want to go after capitalism. If I can take out the building block of capitalism, I don't even have to mention capitalism and they can destroy it. And they're trying to destroy it. So the left believes, the progressive left believes, the capital race theorists believe that private property ownership is the prime example of systematic racism. That single family homes, you know, a nice home, maybe, you know, got a nice yard in the front, maybe a nice yard in the back. You got a little space if you want, and you can afford it, you know, between you and your neighbor. White picket fence. They believe that these, which many of us own, mine isn't that nice, but I have some space, I have some privacy, but they believe that is racism defined because it's equity outcomes, because not all minority families can afford a single family home, that it is racist for us to be able to afford one. They don't care whether we've earned that right or not, earned that privilege, I should say. It's a privilege, not a right, a privilege of buying land under certain zoning regimen. If you know, if you want to buy in a tightly packed condo or tightly packed row housing, you can do that. If you want to buy, you know, in a downtown apartment, you can do that, or rent. Or if you want to buy and get some space out in the country or in the suburb, you should be able to do that, whatever your means are. We do live in a meritocracy, folks. But they believe that housing probably, I'm guessing, this is my words, is their most high profile example of systematic racism in America. They call it housing justice. And just like critical race theory, they're trying to destroy whites in order to promote an anti-racist agenda. Housing justice, which our General Assembly is completely consumed with, is not about destroying racial inequalities. It's about destroying the suburbs and destroying property rights and punishing ownership of homes. Joe Biden wants to start taxing people on the unrealized appreciation of their homes. So if you bought a home a few years ago at X $100,000 and now it's worth X plus $100,000, they want to start taxing you. Even though you haven't sold your home, you would pay that as a capital gains tax once you actually sold your home, but they want to start taxing you now on that. It's just another way to destroy private property ownership. And of course, the government believes that under their eminent domain powers, they can just take your home any damn well time they want for any damn well reason they want. That's going to be coming back too. And as you all know with that, if they start lopping down public housing, big apartment buildings, even if it's private housing, right in the middle of your neighborhood, it's going to decrease your property values. And they want that to happen too. They want the wealth. They want to punish private property ownership. So in his new infrastructure plan, there's a thing in there called the Home Act under Joe Biden, this is. And this Home Act, and again, Tucker Carlson, a lot of this I'm paraphrasing Tucker, some of it in my own words. So, you know, I'm not going to say which is which, but I just want to give Tucker credit here. But, you know, a lot of this is our own experience as well and thoughts. You know, the Home Act, you know, would dramatically expand the federal government's control over suburbs and housing and your home and my home. I mean, they literally want to basically have not a moratorium, but they want to ban any zoning law. And again, most zoning laws are local laws, right? That's you and your government. You bought in XYZ city because, you know, they say you can't build on anything less than an acre or half an acre or whatever the case may be. And certain buildings over certain heights aren't allowed. And that's the kind of place where you wanted to live and invest basically your family's wealth into a home. Well, they want to do away with all that. They want to do away with single family zoning. They want to do away with ordinances that would, you know, essentially ban high rise or multi-unit apartment complexes because they want to destroy your suburbs. They do. Donald Trump, again, was right about this. And what this proves to you is that under this totalitarian direction that we're going with government, and my wife says this all the time, you don't really own your home. We don't really own anything. If we can't choose where to live and under what conditions to live, and maybe some of us had earned it. And by the way, there's no prohibition against minorities from earning income and buying a home themselves in these communities. There's no discrimination here. We live in a meritocracy. But we no longer are in charge of what we own. The government seems like it can just take and tax everything. And it doesn't even seem like they want us to have local and state government anymore. They just want to dictate everything from Washington, D.C. I mean, folks, what I'm going to describe to you next is legalized extortion by the government. It should be criminal. It would be criminal if someone did this in the private sector, but in government, you can get away with it. So the Home Act, you all remember the community development block grants, where HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Federal Agency, would basically bribe local cities and towns into receiving millions of dollars in housing dollars if they agreed to some of these crazy, affordable housing schemes that they put out there. I'm not going to go into detail on that. You know that. You can look it up. It's a long argument. So not only would Biden's Home Act re-implement this incentive to receive new dollars if you implement these affordable housing schemes under the guise of social justice or racial equity, but they want to they actually want to take away other federal money from states and localities if such single family zoning laws or zoning laws that ban apartments exist in a state or in a city. They actually want to start punishing you. I mean, it's a difference between a carrot and a stick. Before it was a carrot. Hey, we'll give you this money if you do this. Now they're saying, if you don't do this, we will punish you. And they're talking about taking away a state's roads and roads and bridges federal money. We need that to maintain our federal highways. They're saying, nope, no more soup for you. No more federal money to upgrade Route 95 or any other federal roads or bridges, federally funded roads or bridges. If you allow racist, I should say, single family zoning and high rise apartment bans in any city and town in your state, you must preempt those cities and towns by implementing state law, or else we're pulling away federal funding of your highways. Federal transportation grants, gone. No more soup for you. What state is going to say, this is extortion? What state is going to say no to that? What city or town is going to say no to that? We know that they can't. We know that the weak-kneed politicians. I can't even blame them. Even strong-kneed politicians. Who's going to say, geez, if it means a huge amount of money that they're going to take from us, I guess we better play the game. I mean, it's really, really a dangerous scheme. They're talking about it. And this isn't the government's money. This isn't the federal government's money that they're giving. This is our money. Our people in our cities and towns, people in our states are paying taxes to the federal government, paying fees to the federal government. And we expect that money to come back to us. Now they're saying, no, not necessarily, unless you play by our rules. Folks, this is insanity. You remember the failed rent control governmental programs of the 70s and 80s, where they tried to manage every aspect of how much a landlord could charge a tenant, and it led to a disaster. There was no more incentive to keep your properties clean and upgraded and structurally sound, or free of rats and other rodents and whatever else fix drips and lighting, electrical, because there was no incentive, because rents were guaranteed pretty much regardless of what a landlord did. A landlord could invest all the money he wanted to upgrade a property, but they couldn't charge any more for it. That's not how free market works. If you offer a superior product, you should get more money from it. Under the government, you can offer an inferior product and get just as much money for it as a superior product. So just like those rent control, the disasters of those rent control programs in the 70s and 80s, now we're talking about something bigger. We're now talking about home controls, private property controls. This will lead to catastrophic failure. It's doomed, but they're going to try to do it anyway. I just want you to think, we're a few days before the July 4th weekend. Just think of the cookouts most of you will likely have in your backyard with your family and friends. No more. Because you won't have a private backyard to have a cookout in. It's going to have to be shared with another family, somebody you don't know, somebody you may not even like. So when the federal government puts out these kinds of incentives and disincentives, both these carrots and the sticks, just imagine how your local towns are going to react to this. Just imagine the extent they are going to go to say, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Mr. President, Mrs. Vice President, we will do everything and more that you ask of us so we can keep the money flow going. Damn B, private property rights. Damn B, owners, their investments, their lifelong family investments, and their right to privacy. Roadmap Rhode Island is going to be back with a vengeance if this gets passed federally. Twice as bad as it was under Obama. Again, private property ownership is the building block for free market capitalism, and they want to tear that away or at least diminish its value greatly. And of course, you better not disagree or else you'll be called, yep, you got it. Do you remember this from way back in those Roadmap Rhode Island days? Here was the headline. Back then, Go Local Prov covered it. A lot of you probably, a lot of our advocates went to some of these Roadmap Rhode Island meetings. They actually set up a consortium to develop ways to implement Roadmap Rhode Island. We went to those as private property owners, just saying, hey, please don't devalue our land, don't infringe on our rights, don't do more eminent domain. And for that, yep, we were called, and the video is out there on the Go Local Prov website. Yep, guess what we were called? Yep, racist. Right there publicly, right out there, just for defending our own rights. And it was a big surprise back then to hear that. Right now, it's just, it's such a trite, overused phrase that it's been diminished in its shock value anymore. Back then, it was shocking. It didn't stop us or slow us down, but it was shocking back then. And in fact, the quote was, in pointing to our group, you tell the Ku Klux Klan that, pointing to us, calling us the Ku Klux Klan, just for defending property rights. There's an affordable housing craze going on in this General Assembly this year. Speaker Shikarchi is all caught up with it. He's mentioned that affordable housing will be a big priority in the budget. I got to look more into this. Affordable fair housing, affordably furthering fair housing is going to be back. They passed an unfair fair housing bill. Did you get that? They passed an fair housing bill that is essentially unfair. It forces landlords to accept Section 8 or government-supported tenants, not because the landlords are racist, because they don't want to deal with the federal regulations that go along with accepting federal money. That should be a private property owner's choice. But in Rhode Island, that's called racist, even though it's not true, and it cannot stand. Joe Biden assured us in response to Trump's taunting that was racist to even suggest that he would want to change America's suburbs. But now, under his Home Act and his big infrastructure plan, he's doing exactly that. He's following the far left Obama playbook on this. Julian Castro, the former secretary of HUD. And folks, we got to keep an eye on this one. But I want you to know, and it worked for Joe Biden. He got a lot of that suburban vote because they believed him. Then they didn't believe Trump. Once again, Trump was right and Biden lied. It's that simple. For over half a century, Rhode Island Right to Life has been shining the light of truth on the ugly reality of abortion. So joining us right now is the executive director of Rhode Island Right to Life, Barth Bracy. Barth, welcome. I think it's your first time in the dugout, right?
It is my first time in the dugout, Mike, and thanks for having me.
I know you don't have a baseball cap, but you have a cap you want to don just for a second or so, just to be part of the team, right?
I do. I didn't bring a baseball cap, but I'm down and outside of DC for some meetings, and we took a little afternoon off to go kayaking on the Shenandoah. So I had a nice little hat to protect my neck, as you can see, and so not quite a dugout hat, but
that's what perfect. Any chapeau works in the dugout. So thanks for donning that. All right, Barth, listen, we're going to get into pro-life and the abortion push, but at a higher level, with everything we're seeing, critical race theory, the over-sexualization of children, legalized prostitution, a push for assisted suicide, everything we're seeing, the culture wars are on, are they not?
They absolutely are. And, you know, if I could just recommend a book, one of the best books I've read recently, and I was just amazed at how prescient he was. A couple months ago, I picked up Robert Bork's book, and I highly recommend it, Slouching Towards Gomorrah. And he wrote this sometime around 1995. For those younger viewers, Robert Bork was Ronald Reagan's pick for the United States Supreme Court back in, gosh, I want to say 87. And he was borked. Bork has become a verb now because of Robert Bork.
The initial cancel culture event, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And this was the Kavanaugh's hearing was confirmation process was kind of a continuation of what began with Robert Bork. The man was an eminently qualified judge and jurist with a long track record. But the problem was he was known to be conservative, and specifically, he was known to have been on record as opposing Roe v. Wade. And so he was destroyed during the nomination process. He was destroyed in the Senate. And the then Senate Judiciary Chairman, who orchestrated and choreographed the destruction of Robert Bork, was then Senator Joe Biden. And he bragged about this. So it's fascinating that Joe Biden, who loves to call himself a Catholic, and at least, you know, during the last presidential election, was fond of being photographed with rosary beads in his hand. He bragged about destroying Robert Bork. Now, Robert Bork's replacement was Anthony Kennedy. And so Kennedy was the swing vote that upheld Roe v. Wade in 1992 in a famous case called Planned Parenthood versus Casey. So Joe Biden probably is more responsible. Everyone knew that, everyone believed on both sides of the issue that Planned Parenthood versus Casey would have resulted in the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
So we're going to talk more about Biden and the federal policies on abortion in a minute, but it's great that you close that circle for us. I mean, it's interesting how things come around. Listen, I want to start with state politics of abortion and your pro-life movement. For many years, former Speaker Nicholas Mattiello was supposedly a pro-life Democrat. He had pledged to the pro-life movement, probably personally to you, that he would never allow, really proactive, pro-choice legislation to move forward. But in 2019, he betrayed you and the pro-life movement, and it was all based on a false Roe v. Wade narrative that somehow that was going to be in danger of being overturned, and therefore the General Assembly had to act. Just very quickly, take us through that whole betrayal saga.
Well, let me start first. You're right. It was a false narrative. And one of the problems when we speak about Roe v. Wade, and I should clarify because I think a recent poll indicated that less than 2/3 of Americans even know what that is. So we talk about it assuming people
Really?
know what
Wow.
it is,
Mhm.
and people just don't know what it is. So Roe v. Wade was a Supreme Court decision in 1973. And what's important is Roe was one decision released alongside another decision on the same day called Doe v. Bolton. And so the two decisions are read together. So Roe v. Wade talked about this idea of, a trimester structure, but you have to read it with Doe v. Bolton, which talked about a health exception. And to characterize the health exception in Doe v. Bolton, it's big enough and wide enough to fit like an entire fleet of empty school buses through.
Yep.
And so the two together essentially legalized abortion for any reason whatsoever, virtually right up until the moment of birth.
Any
And
stated reason, right?
exactly. And it nullified and struck the anti-abortion laws in all 50 states. So that was
Right, take me back
Wade.
to Mattiello. Take me back to
Okay. So what Mattiello was under so I want to bring my favorite folks into this, the Providence Journal. Mattiello was under concerted attack during that 2018 election season. Prior to the elections, the Providence Journal decided apparently to go all in on getting pro-abortion legislators into the State House. So they did a poll, which was really such an absurd poll, again, asking if people wanted to codify Roe v. Wade. They came up with an absurd number, and they kept beating the drum saying 71% of Rhode Islanders support this. Then they actually went so far during that 2018.
Now let me cut in there and say there's another group, Citizens for Life, that did a much more credible scientific poll that showed that over 70% of Rhode Islanders wanted some restrictions.
73%, yes.
All right, but yet they ignored that poll, didn't they?
Exactly. They did. And it was all about the narrative. So, but the Journal was so far in on this that during the, Mike, you know how the endorsement processes work for political action committees. We send out surveys to candidates and put them on record on our issues. Well, the Providence Journal did the same thing. During that election season, they sent out essentially a survey to all the candidates and incumbents, asking them if they would support the codification of Roe v. Wade. So the Providence Journal made this one of the huge issues during the 2018 General Assembly elections. I've never seen anything like it, but they were at the point on this. So they started putting a lot of pressure on Nick Mattiello during that process and during the primaries. So I don't know when he decided and made his political calculation to turn his back on prior to that, a long pro-life record. I believe it was sometime during or after the primaries. And ultimately, I believe, and again, I can't speak for him, I believe he was under pressure to make some concessions in order to be reelected as Speaker. That would seem to be what motivated him.
But again, all based on this false hysterical narrative that Roe v. Wade was about to be overturned under Trump. Mm-hmm. There was no case ever in a court working its way to that level. There was no threat. And like so many like the pay equity bill that's about to pass this House, I know that's not your area, but again, it's based totally on a false narrative. I mean, this has got to be the frustrating thing to you, Barth, is that this very intrusive, almost you could call it murderous legislation is passed all based on a falsehood.
Exactly. And the big falsehood on Roe v. Wade is even if Roe v. Wade were overturned, which this is not going to happen any time in the foreseeable future, and at least not in a completely overturning way. There's some talk that I'm sure we'll get to about a case from Mississippi, but even if it were completely overturned by the Supreme Court, nothing changes in Rhode Island or any other state automatically, because what it means is that now the General Assembly in each state is free, without having this Supreme Court case over their head, to pass the laws that they believe are appropriate for their state.
And that's a big myth, that overturning Roe v. Wade would end abortion legally. It wouldn't. I mean, not that you and I would be for that, but it's just not the way things work. All right, let me stay with the Speaker of the House issue. We've got a new Speaker of the House. Just very, very quickly, because I want to do a little checklist with you here, but Joe Shekarchi, clearly much more liberal, maybe even progressive than Nicholas Mattiello. Are you concerned that even though that one major betrayal by Mattiello, that under Shekarchi, the pro-abortion movement could see more and more victories in the future years coming in this state?
Well, I mean, I will say that, it's a truism that elections have consequences. So, the way I liken, and this is probably important for all your viewers, is we can get very frustrated with what was happening in the General Assembly. But the time to become active is during the elections every 2 years. I always liken it to playing cards. That the elections are the deal. And, once you get that hand, you got to play that hand. Sometimes it's an awful hand, but where we want to improve our odds is during the cards being dealt, during the elections. Right now, it's a tough General Assembly. However, that said, nobody gets everything they want, generally speaking. And so the progressives, who are by and large across the board radically pro-abortion, they had a massive victory. They want more. They always want more. Right now, they're coming back. They want to go to the trough of public funding to get.
Yeah, we're gonna get live. Let me circle back and just reframe that. So
yeah.
So you got the codification of Roe and then some, in my view, in 2019. Just kind of quick yes or no. What in Rhode Island do we have any form of taxpayer-funded abortion? Just yes or no. Any form.
Yes.
Okay, we'll get into that into detail. Is there a risk or a push to see more of that? Or a threat?
Yes, they want to blow the doors wide open. Yes.
Okay, we'll circle back to some of this. Do we have under the age of X, I don't know, is it 18, 16, where a minor can get an abortion without parental consent?
We presently still have a parental consent law on the books with a judicial bypass, of course.
Up to what age?
For minors, up to the age of 18. So
yeah, I don't know how minors are defined, 16 or 18 these days. All right, so up to 18, parental consent without a judicial bypass. Is that under threat? Are the progressives trying to change that as well?
It's on their list of things they would like to change. Yes.
All right. Anything else that expands abortion on like a checklist like that? Just quickly, you want to list off in Rhode Island that where things stand with other related issues to abortion, and whether or not they're under threat.
The major thing they want, their number one issue, is they want taxpayer funding for abortion on demand. Currently, taxpayer funding is only allowed for the so-called exceptions, the hard cases.
Medicaid only or anybody?
Correct. So they want, their primary thing is they want to have, like states like New York and California, they pay for abortions through the state, using state dollars through the Medicaid program. That's the main goal they want here in Rhode Island is taxpayer funded abortions. There's another goal they want.
Have you seen polling on that? How do Rhode Islanders feel about that?
Again, what we saw when we did the polling 2 years ago was that 73% of Rhode Islanders, and it cuts across party lines, were opposed to taxpayer funded abortion. And this has been a consistent number nationwide and in Rhode Island. People don't want to have to pay for other people's abortions, period. And that hasn't changed. And I think anecdotally, people know that even amongst their circles of friends, even amongst circles of progressive friends who may be, pro-choice as they call themselves. So that's their number one goal. They have other goals that are equally scary is they want to mainstream abortion. They want to make it mandatory in all health plans. So they
Insurance
put it on
coverage.
this.
Okay, yeah.
They call it preventive services, and they want to have a list of things which includes so-called reproductive health care, which includes in their mind access to abortion. The biggest problem about that is that they want all healthcare providers to be forced to either perform or refer for abortions. So one of the bills before the General Assembly would force the Little Sisters of the Poor in Pawtucket at the Jean Jagan home to provide insurance coverage for their employees to pay for abortions. And I mean, it's insane that there are people in the General Assembly that would like to force these Catholic nuns to pay for other people's abortions. Certainly, if they believe that this is important, they could find other ways to pay for it than forcing
I mean,
nuns.
aren't you confident that even if that passes in Rhode Island, that the recent Supreme Court rulings would overturn that? I mean, it might put us through a hell of a process, but it looks like at the Supreme Court level, they are in some way protecting religious freedom when it comes to some of these extreme radical ideas.
To a certain degree, yes, but we don't want to have to see these poor little sisters having to litigate for their entire lives. And secondly, it's a little different under state law than federal law. When you have a state mandate, it's a little more challenging than federal law. But again, we would rather not see that law pass in the first place.
All right. Speaking of federal law, so President Biden, who you mentioned way back when, was nothing but a tool of the abortion left back during the Bork. And by the way, as a side note, I met Robert Bork's son at an event earlier this year at this place, Coeur d'Alene in Idaho, and he republished a book that Bork wrote, and I got him to sign it. So anyway, I met Robert Bork's son, and he gave a great presentation. But Joe Biden, again, is staying with his extremist abortion positions, and I don't know if you say he's leading the charge, but he certainly made it known that he would support stripping away the Hyde Amendment, which prohibits federal funding of abortions. Tell us more about the Hyde Amendment at the federal level.
And this is the battle at the federal level. So the Hyde Amendment was, it's called the Hyde Amendment because it was sponsored by Congressman Henry Hyde from Illinois back in 1976. So abortion was legalized by way of Roe v. Wade in 73. In 76, they had realized that Medicaid was paying for some 300,000 abortions a year. So Congressman Hyde, understood that it's wrong to force objecting taxpayers to pay for the taking of innocent human life. So he put forth his amendment. Now it's called an amendment because it's not a permanent law. It's an amendment it's a rider that is attached to the annual appropriations bill for the Department of Health and Human Services, which funds
and every year it gets
every year. And it's passed every year since 1976. There were some maneuverings back in 1993. Bill and Hillary Clinton tried to fight against the Hyde Amendment then, but again, it prevailed, and it's been bipartisan since 1976 with a large number of Democrats. So this has been the most durable bipartisan policy perhaps in all of the federal government for almost 50 years. And all of a sudden this year, they're trying to attack it. So this is Joe Biden, who used to brag about his support for the Hyde Amendment. And so whether he's done an about face on who he's always been, or whether he's potentially, I don't know, it's a decline of his mental faculties, but this is unprecedented.
And I'm sure you would agree that this push for the Hyde Amendment comes in the face of probably what was the 4 years of the most pro-life president ever, which surprised a lot of people, in Donald Trump. Any disagreement there?
Not at all. I will admit I was one of the people who was surprised. Yep. He was not on my original list of people that I would have supported, but he arguably and objectively, he and his administration were the most pro-life, certainly since Ronald Reagan.
All right. Now, other than the hundreds of millions or tens of millions that go to Planned Parenthood from the federal budget, like I asked you, is there, because of the Hyde Amendment, is all other forms of direct support, federal taxpayer support of abortion non-existent and only exist through funding of Planned Parenthood, or have they snuck in other ways to directly fund it? I know they fund abortions in other countries, I believe, but what would you say outside of the Planned Parenthood pipeline? Have people gotten around the Hyde Amendment somehow?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of money. There's a lot of various appropriations bills, and Planned Parenthood is masterful at getting money. So uh, the Medicaid program is structured, and this is a tough one. People say, well, can't we just? People were asking during the Trump years, can't we just defund Planned Parenthood? Well, one of the challenges is there's no line item in the federal budget, for example, that allocates $500 million to Planned Parenthood, which is roughly at least what they're getting.
There's no
What
line.
it is,
Huh.
no, it's the way the Medicaid program has always been structured is you, the patient, get to choose your doctor. Which of course we think is a great thing. You should be able to choose your doctor. And then Medicaid reimburses. So it's assuming that doctor accepts Medicaid, you get to choose who that doctor is, and Medicaid reimburses for that. So uh, the patients themselves are the ones who are maybe going to Planned Parenthood for perhaps contraception or other things. And so Medicaid reimburses Planned Parenthood for
So they
those
could have put
services
in a
provided.
claim. Okay, got it. All right, before we circle back to your organization, what people can do to join, I know you've got a summer program coming up I want to talk about, but you're not just all about pro-life and abortion. I know that you guys have advocated against assisted suicide. What is the status of that in Rhode Island, and what is the threat of that in Rhode Island?
It's a major threat, and it's a growing threat. They've been trying to they've been filing bills to legalize assisted suicide for years in Rhode Island. It's an ongoing threat. We have to defend it against it every year, and this is an area we've been increasingly working on is denial of care near the end of life based upon things like if you ever want to scare yourself, look up things like quality adjusted life years. And there are some efforts to bend the cost curve, is what you always hear from bureaucrats. And typically, the way they want to bend that cost curve is by limiting or denying care. And very scary is they want to deny that care based upon quality of life. So if you have an arthritic knee, Mike, they're going to look at you and say, your quality adjusted life years today are less than what they were when you were playing for the Boston Red Sox because it takes you 5 times longer to get from to first base than it did back then.
Only twice as long. Only twice.
Okay, twice. So clearly your quality of life is worse. Therefore, you are not entitled to the same degree of care today that you would have been 30 years ago.
That's really the standard, huh?
Exactly. And so
it ignores the humanity in us all, doesn't it?
Correct. And so these are scary bills. So most of the bills that I have to read and analyze and send off for further research are these very long and technical insurance bills that come in at a couple hundred pages. But people should be watching those. This is about your care.
All right. Right now, this session, this year, well, these special sessions always keep the door open. You don't know what the hell is going to happen when they come back in the fall. You never know what's on the fast track, what's being permanently sidelined, temporarily. You just don't know. That's the problem with our legislative process here in the state. But whether it's assisted suicide, whether it's furthering of the abortion footprint, is there anything that you believe is imminently going to happen this year?
It is hard to say. This has been one of the most strange, obviously, because of the pandemic, General Assembly sessions in history. It looks as though this week is going to wind down without anything radical happening on the life issues. You're right, the special session we have to watch. What I will say is this, what gives me pause is that the progressives are throwing out all the rules of how things have been done in the General Assembly for ages. Right. They are, when you give them anything, they want more. And a couple of years ago on the abortion bill, they used thuggery and intimidation.
Oh, yeah, they totally bastardized the process. Yep. Totally.
Exactly.
Changed
And it was, but it worked. And so for anyone who has children, if they throw a temper tantrum and you give in to them, they're going to throw a temper tantrum next time they want something as well. And that's what the progressives are doing. So they tried to force the Senate leadership to send a bill to a different committee earlier this year. And it was an unprecedented move on the floor to try to challenge the leadership of the Senate president. They failed, but they got 15 votes. They needed 20 to make it pass, but they got 15. So you have to watch the progressives. They are dangerous. They may try to pull something in the special session.
They don't like playing by the rules. All right, I'm going to get one more minute. If you can summarize your organization, what people can do. I know you've got a summer internship program. You've got a baby registry. So I'm going to give you 1 minute for an unabashed plug about your organization, how people can find you, support you, and some of the programs that might be interested in. Go ahead, Barth.
Thanks, Mike. What a lot of people don't know is we help almost 1,000 families every year. We've been doing it for 50 years with diapers, wipes, clothing, formula, bassinets, strollers, cribs. If you've got old leftover baby items, gently used clothing from infant to 5T, please bring it to us. We gave out over $101,000 of material assistance last year to almost 1,000 families.
Wow.
It's a huge part of what we do. The need is great in Rhode Island. So please come for a visit. Bring your baby items. You can go online to our baby registry and help us out with diapers.
What's the main website?
RIRTL.org.
Rhode Island Right to Life. That's the acronym
correct.
for Rhode Island Right. RIRTL.org. Okay.
And you can follow us on
registry. What a great idea. Okay.
It is Facebook and Instagram. We do a lot there, but we have a lot of volunteer opportunities. We have people who volunteer to fold clothes and help us with that sort of thing. So come for a visit. I'd be happy to give you a tour. And if you're looking for volunteer opportunities or internships for your students, give us a call.
Barth Bracy, you and your organization have been supporting the cultural values of so many Rhode Islanders for so many years. We thank you for your service to the state, for your great work, and we'll look forward to having you back on the show to update us on your pro-life movement in Rhode Island and comment nationally. Barth Bracy, Rhode Island Right to Life. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mike. Take care.
Good day. And joining me now is my new friend, Jeff Krupp, who I met recently earlier this month at our Idaho meeting of conservative meeting leaders. Jeff, welcome to In the Dugout, all the way from, where are you, Portland, Oregon, or what town are you in?
No, thankfully, I'm not in Portland, Oregon. I'm a couple hours south where actually sane, rational people live. Now, I farm, fifth-generation Oregon farmer, so I'm a couple hours south in the Willamette Valley, however, but just far enough away that I don't have to worry about that madness coming into my neighborhood.
Yeah, no, of course not. Yeah, I don't know if you say that in jest or not. We all have to worry. I see you're in the spirit in the dugout. You got a cap on. I've got my Coeur d'Alene, Idaho hat where we met and got to know each other.
Right.
What's your cap say, Jeff?
I've got a Willamette Valley Farmer Professional cap, perfect for a farmer.
And I know you just got done doing the first part of harvesting grass seed, which is your family farm business. So good luck with that. I know you've got a process to go. All right, listen. Today, we had a stunning discussion, I have to admit, when we were in Idaho. We were sitting there having a cocktail, if I remember, a little small group of people. And we were talking about Portland and everything that went on there. We're going to get into that in a minute. But you made the statement that you think Portland literally could be a dead city.
Yes.
That it may never recover its prosperity or whatever. What did you mean by that, Jeff?
Well, first of all, I'm not alone in thinking that. One of our largest liberal news stations, TV stations, Coin 6, the CBS affiliate, did an entire series called Is Portland Over? And they asked this question, and it's not just based on...
And literal, they meant it literally.
Oh, yeah. And for a variety of reasons. And it all comes back to leadership, and we'll get to that in a moment. But you got to remember, last summer, Portland had over 100 consecutive, let me say that word again, consecutive nights of violent protests 27 of them declared official rights.
I thought
Okay.
they were mostly peaceful.
No, not at all. Okay. That's why thousands of people were arrested. And that's a whole nother story because they're not being prosecuted for violent protesting, number one. But secondly, then it's Portland's attitude when it comes to the homelessness. And the Coin 6, Channel 6, did something I never thought that they would do. They really asked the question seriously, is Portland savable? Because it has gone so far downhill. If you go into the
I mean,
you know,
that's a stunning question to consider.
Oh, it is. It is for a liberal TV station to ask that. It tells you, and some of our recent polling backs this up, that a large number of people who live in Portland, which is 7-1 Democrat over Republican, it's very, very liberal, very regressive, Marxist thinking. Almost 80% of them think Portland is headed in the wrong track. That's why they did this series. So it tells us that there is this real problem that at least it's perceived.
All right. So the reason we want to have you on is to maybe draw parallels to see if Providence might be heading down that same wrong.
Well, I hope not.
And if Providence might be destroyed. I mean, we're going to get into some of that in just a second, but I want to just inform our viewers that you are an astute political observer. You've been involved in politics, and you have your own radio show for an hour every morning in the region. So you are someone with credibility and experience in all this. So you mentioned that Portland is the progressive capital of the world. You mean that?
Right. I do, because so much of the radical environmental movement came out of Portland early on, the Earth First movement, clear back in the late 70s and 80s, that they were burning down Bureau of Land Management and U.S. Forest Service buildings. There's all of these radical elements that has really come out of Rose City. Antifa is very proud to state that they started the anti-fascist radical movement that we saw play out, that was part of this 100 consecutive nights of violent protest. Clearly it has spread all across the country, and they have bragged about sending people to Europe.
All right, let's do this. Let's do a quick round of batting practice.
Sure.
Just some quick yes or no or really short answers, and then we'll circle back and go into depth in some of them that I think might be most relevant to Providence. So true, you had part of the downfalls, you had massive SWAT team resignations out of the police force. That was recent, true?
That is absolutely true. It's
All right.
all 50 members resigned.
All 50 of the SWAT
All
team.
50.
All right, so that's fighting crime team. Now, I assume that's part of I assume there's a defund the police movement, and as it actually happened in Portland.
They did actually early on last summer. They took $25 million out of the Portland Police Bureau budget, and they specifically defunded the gang enforcement team. That's why the gang murders are up 800% in Portland.
Yeah, we've seen that stat locally. Is that gang murders are up 800% or overall murders?
Well, actually, overall murders are up less than that, but gang murders specifically are up 800%.
No police around the police. Have there been property destruction crime increases?
Oh yeah, and that's because it continues because our social justice warrior, George Soros funded district attorney, new one, declined to prosecute over 1,000 people arrested for destroying property and damaging things.
All right. Yeah, I think that's on my list later. All right. You just yes or no, like Providence, does Portland have a major municipal employee government union problem and pension unfunded liability problem?
Yes, they do.
I mean, for all intents and purposes, Providence should be declared bankrupt. Should Portland be declared bankrupt?
It's sure headed that way.
All right. Well, we've been having that debate for years here. Of course, nobody wants to be the political person in charge. No governor, no mayor wants to be the person to do that. Is Portland, like Providence, a declared sanctuary city?
Yes.
Has it, and it's eliminated its relationship with ICE?
Unless there is a specific court order from ICE, they will not coordinate with them. That's correct.
All right, I assume, I'm assuming, I won't assume, yes or no, do you have an open air homeless encampment problem with, tents on the street, vagrants, panhandling, drugs, garbage? Do you have all that problem in Portland?
Everywhere, and not just Portland, but it's all across the big cities, but it's worse in downtown Portland, which is why business is leaving the downtown area and why Coin 6, the CBS affiliate, asked the question, is Portland over? It is so bad, they don't think it can come back. And
Yeah,
believe
you
me,
can't survive without commerce, right?
you can't. And when you have all these high-rise buildings, Mike, that are full of law firms and investment firms and so forth, and just like in downtown San Francisco, and you can't go anywhere without stepping in human feces, and all you see is trash everywhere, boarded up windows. Why would you want to have your business there? Because your employees don't feel safe, and people don't feel safe going down there. And the homeless people know it, and they camp out, and the city does nothing about it. And you do not want your Providence to turn out like that.
Yeah, we're not quite to that level yet, but we are, there's a lot of, we're heading there. Let's put it that way. So let's stay with the commerce.
Okay.
I assume with the pension crisis that property taxes are enormously high for commercial businesses.
Yes, they are. And now many of those commercial businesses are leaving because every time they reopen, their windows and their doors get smashed and they can't do business.
So it's not just crime, vagrants, and and garbage and homeless.
It's political crime.
It's we combine that with enormously high property taxes, right, enormously high damages to your buildings. I mean, it's just an unworkable venue.
This once beautiful downtown area of Portland that is iconic it's just awful. And there's graffiti everywhere. They're not really trying to clean it up at this point. You do not want to let your city, Providence, get to that point.
All right. Reparations. The Providence mayor, one of the few in the country that has actually started a committee and some formal process to investigate. Are we seeing that in Portland as well?
And not only in Portland, but actually the Oregon Senate in this last legislative session that just concluded, they passed a reparations bill. It died over in the House because it's like $1.3 billion a year out of the state budget. And nobody knew where that money was going to come from, let alone the idea of it.
Now, you mentioned earlier the lack of prosecution. So basically, would you say that there's a catch and release policy in Portland where criminals will catch you, will book you, then we'll just let you right back out in the street again? And
yeah, there is clearly, in fact, that's what we sadly jokingly call the new DA. We call him Mike Catch and Release Schmidt.
All right. Well, here in Providence, I don't know if it was somebody who was released early, but a convicted rapist from decades ago was released. And not only did they, of course, fund his, I believe, his living conditions, but the city paid for 2 bodyguards to protect him.
Oh, my goodness.
Have you ever seen anything like that?
No.
Well, I just wanted to say that to give you a sense as to how radical on any specific issue some of the leadership here in Providence could be. We're talking about property taxes. We have a problem here in Rhode Island and Providence in particular with nonprofits. Brown University buying up prime property, and then because they're a nonprofit, they don't have to pay property taxes. Have you been having that phenomenon in Portland?
Yeah, it does happen. We are blessed, however, that back in 1990, Oregon passed, the citizens of Oregon passed by a citizens vote, a property tax limitation measure that has saved Oregon citizens, taxpayers, property owners, at least $20 billion. And for a small state like ours, where our population is 4 million, of course, back then it was 2 million, that's a lot of money.
All right, I want to go back to the, I lost my notes here. Yeah, Providence has formed its own Climate Justice Committee. Our mayor is part of a national mayoral climate agenda committee. They actually think that policies in Providence can affect regional global temperatures. Same thing in Portland?
Yes, same thing in Portland and same thing in the state of Oregon. State of Oregon is part of a Western States Climate Initiative. And even the cap and trade bill, which they just passed, it will basically make in testimony in
Cap
front
and
of
trade
this.
for gasoline or electricity?
It's everything. So we shut down our only coal-fired plant. They don't classify dams. Our dams that produce most of our electricity here in Oregon is renewable, unbelievably. So all of this will make in testimony virtually no difference at all in worldwide global temperatures.
All right. Have you followed San Francisco's lead in allowing free shoplifting? You can shoplift as a form of reparation, and just we're not going to worry about that.
Not yet, but that's coming.
Okay. Last question. I think a lot of Oregon counties on your eastern border have voted to try to secede from the state and join Idaho, where you and I met earlier this month. Is that, I mean, what's the motivation behind it? A, this is not a yes or no question, obviously, but, and B, is there any chance that it will happen?
Well, I'll answer the second one first. There's no chance it'll happen. Congress would have to approve it. The president would have to agree to it. Both legislatures of both states and governors would have to approve it. That's just not going to happen. The motivation before it is the right one, however. This is people standing up saying that you people on the west side in crazy Portland do not represent, and believe me, Portland and its craziness drives the politics of Oregon. You don't represent us, our values, and we don't want to be part of you any longer. 7 counties have voted to become part of Greater Idaho. And I understand that. I unfortunately am a 5th generation Oregon farmer. I'm tied to the land. I have to stay here and fight or just take whatever gets rammed down my throat in the form of Marxist radical tyranny. These people have said, no, we reject that. We want to be part of a place that has the right common sense thinking and freedom and liberty in their policies.
All right. So, yeah. I mean, you can understand the motivation, but yeah, I agree that they're never going to allow that to happen. Last question about Portland, then we'll wrap it up, Jeff. Education. In Providence, nobody knows how many illegal immigrants are here, but we know they're here. We know that a lot of affordable housing is designed for that purpose. We also know that, you know, they're in our schools. But in Providence, it's something literally like 90 to 95% of the students in K through 12 public schools in the city of Providence are either a minority, Black or Hispanic. Anything like that in Portland?
It isn't quite that to those levels, but I believe Portland has to provide services in over 100 different languages, which is a stunning thing if you think about it.
100 different languages.
Over 100. I read that statistic some time ago and it just blew me away because I don't know how you try to make that work and have any semblance.
Obviously, you guys have a more of a Asian influence probably there than we have, you know, from Southeast Asia, I would think.
Asian, Hispanic. One of the interesting things is we also, like you in Providence, we don't know how many of these million+ people that have crossed the border from the beginning of the year till now, how many of them are in Portland, but we have to provide them services. And the legislature just voted, first in the nation, of course, to provide Medicaid, free medical care to illegal aliens. And people here who've lived there, born here, like
That's
me.
Portland or Oregon did that? The city,
the entire
or the
state. It's
entire
state policy, not just Portland, but it'll affect Portland and Portland public schools dramatically.
All right. Let's wrap it up and just give you an open forum. So here's sort of the question. You know, it's one thing to have liberal policies. It's one thing to tax and spend, you know, but at what point do you think, and again, position this as a warning or as to Providence, at what point did Portland, I mean, we barely even talked about the riots other than what you mentioned off the top, you know, civil unrest. At what point did Portland cross the line and get on what might be that irredeemable path towards becoming a dead city? What happened there, and what's the warning for Providence?
I think it built up for a long time. Remember the Occupy Wall Street movement?
Yeah.
that was very big in Portland some years ago. It's been building and building and building. To answer your question, the point where the line was crossed was when BLM and Antifa joined forces in these violent protests, and the police let them get away with it because the police were told to stand down by the liberal mayor, Ted Wheeler, feckless mayor, trust fund baby, who has no sense of how to keep people safe. And keeping people safe is government's #1 ethical, moral duty. And they didn't do it. They let the downtown become destroyed. They let these violent protests go on. They let it happen over and over and over again, night after night. That's the point that it was crossed. And now we're seeing the fruit of this. This is why you cannot allow this to happen. You have to clamp down on this. The citizens of Providence have to demand that the laws, the crime laws, are enforced, and you don't let this happen in your city. Otherwise, you will become like Portland and San Francisco.
I don't even know if I want to air this piece now, Jeff. Because
Sorry.
I mean, because while we have elements of Antifa and BLM, and we had some minor rioting last summer, very limited in scope. I mean, it was bad on those nights. Probably downplayed a lot. You know, I don't think our city is dominated by those factions yet. But I think what you're saying is those factions were allowed to dominate law enforcement, dominate politics, dominate the culture in those cities. I'm going to bring on the Providence Observer and respond to your interview. I don't think we're there yet in Providence. So I don't know if I'll actually air this because we don't want to get there, but
that's okay. I get it.
No,
we're airing it. We're airing this.
Yeah, okay.
Oh boy.
We will air it. Jeff Krupp, listen, wow, what a eye-opening. I mean, this is real. Portland could be a dead city.
Yes.
We have one building, we call it the Superman building, that is abandoned and no one knows to do with it. Let me just, are there fully abandoned buildings in downtown Portland right now?
Not yet, but they're getting there. There are major law firms that are telling the city that they are picking up their multi-floor law practices in these large high-rises, and they are moving to somewhere else in the Portland metro area, out of the city of Portland, unless they clean up this mess. So far, the city hasn't done it.
Jeff Krupp, if with your permission, we'll invite you back as things develop in Providence. I think this Portland-Providence parallel, PPP, is a really interesting topic. Thank you so much for your time today, and good luck with your harvesting of your grass seed.
Thanks, Mike. It's fun to be in the dugout with you, and I look forward to doing it again.
All right, Jeff Krupp from just south of Portland, Oregon, our guest today. Thanks, Jeff. So once again, you're hearing things on this show you're not going to hear anywhere else in the Rhode Island media. I hope you appreciate that. And, and it's because of my national contacts and the perspective that brings. But again, in all three major topics today, the return of Roadmap Rhode Island, based on the false narrative of housing injustice and systematic racism in the suburbs, the false narrative from the pro-abortion advocates about the threat to Roe v. Wade and the need to codify Roe in this state years ago. It didn't happen. We all know it was a false narrative. It's been proven. It's false. And as we're seeing in Portland, Oregon, the false narrative that appeasing the far left, appeasing the violent radicals, appeasing the really dangerous domestic terrorists, if you want to use that term, which I don't like to use, but let's use it to make a point. The false narrative that appeasing them, appeasing the homeless, letting them riot, letting them destroy private property, allowing murder rates to increase, allowing homelessness, vagrancy, trash, drug use unabated, even allowing shoplifting, that somehow is compassionate and leads to a better society. Again, it is nothing but false narratives that is driving the agenda of the left. And it's just stunning how research, science, our life's experience, our nation's experiences don't matter anymore. The narrative is created often in academia, often by the far left advocates, perpetuated in the media, and that narrative becomes the sacrosanct vision where public policy must be adopted to comply with it. It's insanity, folks. It's insanity. The left's never, never land of make-believe. To this we've come. To this we've come. It's just amazing. We'll see you tomorrow on In the Dugout. Dr. Andrew Boston, bottom of the hour, Nikki Niley from the national group, Parents Defending Education. Thanks for being with us today in the Dugout. See you next game.